Hello and welcome to healthyhouseplants.com, where we teach you all about gardening in the great indoors. If you'd like to support our show, please use our Amazon affiliate link below. Today we have a plant care video for this beauty, Ficus umbellata, also known as the umbrella fig tree. I absolutely love this plant. It is so eye-catching. You notice it as soon as you walk into a room. It has such beautiful foliage, as you can see, and you can see why it's called the umbrella fig as well, because of that beautiful big foliage. So the Ficus umbellata is a rare member of the ficus family of plants that includes fiddle leaf fig and rubber tree. The Ficus umbellata is commonly called umbrella fig tree, as I mentioned, for its large, eye-catching, heart-shaped, shiny green leaves that sit atop a thin, elegant trunk. And it is just, as mentioned, such a beautiful plant. The plant is native to Africa, and it's starting to become more popular and more readily available. So if you can find one, I would definitely suggest growing one of these because they are very easy to grow, and as mentioned, they are very stunning as well. The Ficus umbellata will grow up to 4 feet tall and wide indoors, and it's a fairly fast-growing indoor tree if you have the ideal growing requirements, which I am going to talk to you about now. So lighting for the Ficus umbellata. So Ficus umbellata requires bright indirect light to grow its best. Direct sun exposure is not a good idea because that will burn the leaves and they will also droop as well. So you definitely don't want to burn any of these leaves because the burns marks, which will turn, you'll have brown spots and they will also turn black in the middle of the leaf. Those won't go away, so you'll have to prune them off and then hopefully get new growth to take over where that growth was. So as mentioned, no direct sun exposure. That would mean not putting this plant in a southern or western window. If you want to grow it near a southern or western window, you need to place it several feet from the window to avoid the sunburn that I was just talking about. The plant can take morning sun from an eastern window though, and that's a really good situation for this plant. It also can be grown in front of a northern window, although it may not get quite enough light in front of that northern window. However, you can also add full spectrum lighting. This plant loves full spectrum lighting, and actually this plant has been growing in full spectrum lighting, and you can see how happy it is. Okay, so if you get the lighting right, then you also want to look next at the watering. Okay, so the Ficus umbellata requires what I would call medium watering. You don't want to let the plant dry out completely, as this will damage the plant, cause it to delay growth, and the leaves will also be droopy, and it can really harm the plant. But you don't want to water too much because that can quickly lead to root rot, which will also cause drooping leaves. So you want to water Ficus umbellata when the moisture meter reads 4 or the top 1 to 3 inches of soil has dried out. So how far down you go between the 1 and 3 inches depends on the size of the plant and the size of its pot. The bigger the plant, the bigger the pot, the deeper you want to go. You would want to go more to the 3-inch mark. Easier way, as mentioned, is to use the moisture meter and water when the moisture meter reads 4, and definitely when the top of the soil has dried out. Ficus umbellata will require more watering in the spring and summer months when it will be more actively growing. So keep that in mind as well, that you're going to need to start watering more in the spring and summer months, which is common with the rest of your indoor garden as well. Okay, so if you get a lot of yellowing leaves, however, that could be an indication of too much water. So watch that as well. If you, as mentioned, if you start to get yellowing leaves can be a sign of other problems, but one of them can be that you're watering too much. Fertilizing this beauty. The Ficus umbellata is less fertilizer demanding than some plants, but it does need regular feeding during the growing season. So I would suggest watering, using a fertilizer in water on a monthly basis from spring through fall. So just once a month, spring through fall, using a liquid fertilizer when you water. Use a well-balanced organic fertilizer. Always make sure to use an organic fertilizer because chemical fertilizers will quickly burn roots of houseplants, and especially of this plant, which has delicate roots in that regard. Okay, humidity. Since Ficus umbellata is from tropical regions, it does prefer humid environments. The ideal humidity level for this plant is 50% and above. So check your area, check your indoor garden with a hygrometer. I have a video on hygrometers and how to use them. I will put a link below for that, as well as any other videos I mentioned in this video and any related videos. If your home is dry, you're going to need to humidify for this plant to be happy. What will happen often if this plant is not getting enough humidity is that it will get brown leaf tips and even brown edges sometimes as well. So add extra humidity if you're having a problem with low humidity. You may even need to use a humidifier if it's really dry, say 35% or lower in your home. But if you're talking about 40%, 45%, somewhere in there, you can do many things to help humidify the plants. I do have videos on how to increase humidity. So some of the things you can do is to use a humidity tray. You can also mist, and you can also grow a lot of plants because house plants humidify each other. They release vapor, and when they do that, they humidify the plants next to them. So the more plants you have, the more humid your indoor garden is going to be. So temperature for Ficus umbellata. Once again, it is from a tropical locale, so it does need warmer temperatures. You want to give the plant temperatures between 65 and 85 degrees. So that's a fairly wide range, and a lot of homes will hit that hit somewhere in there. It can't tolerate very much colder than 65 for very long, and it doesn't do all that great in very high temperatures, as a lot of houseplants don't either. So those extreme temperatures aren't really amenable to this plant. And one thing you want to keep in mind too is to keep the plant away from drafts, especially cold drafts, and also away from the direct line of fire from forced air heating and air conditioning, because that will dry out the foliage. Even though this plant has pretty big size leaves, as you see, and they're very attractive, pretty good sized leaves. They are fairly thin. They are thinner than their cousin, the fiddle leaf fig, which has much thicker foliage, and their other cousin, the rubber tree as well, which is another ficus, Ficus elastica, which has very thick leaves. So these leaves are much thinner, and if they get dried out by forced air conditioning, forced heating, that is when they will tend to get those dried edges, dried tips, and get on the crunchy side, which obviously you don't want to do to this plant. So repotting the Ficus umbellata. It should be repotted once a year because the roots it is a pretty fast grower, as mentioned, especially in the spring and summer months. And when it does grow, it's also going to use up the nutrients in the soil. So common signs that it needs repotting, or there'll be roots coming out of the drainage holes, or it will also surpass the 2/3 plant to 1/3 pot ratio that I always talk about. So once you start to get more like 3/4 plant on top and 1/4 pot below, it's time to put the plant into a bigger pot. Just go up 1 pot size. Don't go crazy and get a huge pot. That can lead to root rot because there won't be enough roots in the pot. So go up 1 pot size. Use a soil that is water retentive yet drains well. I will put a link below for some soil down below. The Pro Mix BX is what I grow a lot of my plants in, and I also make my own soil, and I have a video on how to do that as well, and the plant does well in that soil as well. Whatever pot you do put the plant in, when you repot, do make sure that it has drainage holes, because as mentioned, this plant does like to remain well watered. However, you definitely don't want it to be in soggy soil, and especially in a pot without drainage holes. Okay, pruning. So the umbrella tree does need regular maintenance to retain its shape. So you will want to cut out any dried leaves, any brown leaves, any yellow leaves, just to keep it looking good. And that will also keep it from getting pests and diseases, especially pests, which are attracted to older dying foliage as well. The best time for pruning and shaping it a little bit, you don't need to do much, just a little bit of cleanup and shaping, is in late winter or early spring. And if you have maybe extra branching going on and you want to cut it back a little bit more than just some shaping and some cleanup, then whatever you do, as I always mention, do not cut back more than 1/3 of the plant at any pruning, because if you do, you will shock the plant and you can very well kill the plant. These plants, as mentioned, they don't need that much pruning anyway, but I'm just mentioning that if, say, you get another branch and you just would like to keep it to maybe one trunk or something like that. Okay, so pests and diseases. So the umbrella tree fig is susceptible to various pests. Those are spider mites and scale. So the spider mites are a lot of times a little bit less of a problem because spider mites like it very dry, and since you're going to be trying to get the humidity up, that usually the spider mites won't like those conditions. They also can get scale, which does like it on the moisture side. Those are little brown bumps. I do have videos on the scale, and what you want to do is you want to treat with neem oil and to get the scale under control. Insecticidal soap can also work, and 91% alcohol can also work. What you do is spray it on, and you will need to gently with your fingers wipe the scale off. Whatever you use, you want to remove the scales after you spray or during the spraying process, and rinse it really well. The scale is very, very difficult because they really do suction onto the plants, so it's a little harder to get them off, and if you try to pick them off without trying to disengage them with something like neem oil or the alcohol, then you tend to damage the leaves, pulling the scale off. So just keep a good eye out. One of the things with pests on any houseplants, especially on this one, is if you can catch it really early and get rid of just those few, then you'll be a lot better off than having a full-blown infestation. And as mentioned, in terms of diseases, root rot is common if you overwater, so do make sure not to overwater. Signs of root rot: yellowing, droopy leaves despite the soil still being wet, and brown mushy roots. Those are signs. I do have a root rot playlist that shows you how to save a plant from root rot. So if you think that your plant may be having this problem, then take a look at that as well. So there you go for keeping this beauty healthy and happy in your indoor garden. Thank you for stopping by today. Please leave any comments about any indoor gardening tutorials you'd like to see. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. And please check the bell if you'd like to be notified when new videos are released.